If you love emotional stories that feel real, go ahead and subscribe to Untold Afro-Korean Stories right now, and comment where you're watching from. Because tonight's story begins in the rain, with a woman running for her life. Rain slammed against the neon streets of Busan hard enough to blur the traffic lights into streaks of red and blue. People hurried under umbrellas. Restaurant workers dragged garbage bags toward the curb. Taxi horns bounced through the wet night air. And right in the middle of it all, a young woman was running for her life. Amara Okoye nearly slipped as her broken shoe scraped across the flooded pavement. Her breath tore painfully from her chest. One hand clutched a cheap plastic food container against her hoodie, while the other shoved wet curls away from her face. Behind her, two men shouted in Korean. "Stop her! She stole it!" "I didn't steal anything," she yelled back in broken Korean. "I work there. I work there." Nobody stopped to help. Nobody ever did. A motorcycle splashed dirty water across her jeans as she cut sharply into a narrow alley between two buildings. Her lungs burned. Her legs felt weak from exhaustion after another 16-hour shift spread across two restaurants. Then suddenly, she crashed straight into someone. The impact knocked the container from her hand. The lid burst open. Hot stew splattered across a black coat so expensive it probably cost more than 3 months of her rent. The entire alley went silent. Amara froze. One of the guards caught up and grabbed her wrist hard enough to hurt. "She stole food from the restaurant," he said angrily in Korean to the man she had collided with. Amara immediately bowed over and over. I'm sorry. Please. I did not steal." They throw food away. She stopped talking when she finally looked up properly. The man standing in front of her was tall, calm, and completely expressionless despite stew dripping down the front of his coat. Rain hit his dark hair lightly. Behind him sat a black sedan with the engine running. The guards suddenly looked nervous. That was when Amara realized this man mattered. A lot. The stranger glanced down at the ruined coat, then at the spilled stew, then finally at her trembling face. Quietly, he said, "She didn't steal anything." The guards blinked. "Sir, we saw her leave with." He reached into his wallet without even raising his voice. "How much for the container?" The older guard hesitated. "It's not about the how much." The man's tone remained soft, which somehow made it worse. The guard swallowed. 20,000 won. The stranger handed him cash immediately. "Now leave." Both guards bowed deeply before backing away fast. Amara stared at him in complete confusion while rainwater dripped from her curls onto the pavement. Why would a rich stranger help her? Men like this usually looked through people like her as if they didn't exist. The man studied her for another quiet second before speaking. "You run very badly." Amara blinked. "What?" "You almost fell 3 times. She stared at him like he had lost his mind. Then, unexpectedly, he held out a handkerchief. "For your face," he said. She didn't take it. "I can buy my own." His eyes shifted slightly with amusement. "I believe you." Then he walked back toward the car. Just before entering, he paused. The stew smelled good. And then he was gone. Amara stood there in the rain long after the sedan disappeared. One of the guards muttered under his breath, "You are lucky tonight." Lucky. She almost laughed. People who were lucky did not hide from immigration officers. People who were lucky did not sleep 4 hours a night while sending most of their money home to Nigeria. People who were lucky did not spend every day pretending not to be afraid. Back in her tiny apartment later that night, Amara sat on the floor eating instant noodles beside a flickering fan. Her younger sister's voice played through her cheap phone speaker. "Auntie Ngozi came by today," her sister said softly from Lagos. "She asked when you're coming home." Amara closed her eyes. "What did you tell her?" "That you're building something." A bitter smile touched her lips. "Building. That sounded better than surviving." "You should sleep," Amara said quietly. "You sound tired." "I'm always tired." Her sister laughed weakly. "One day you'll own your restaurant and start shouting at workers like those Korean aunties you complain about." Amara smiled for real this time. "My workers will fear me." Terrifying. "They will cry every morning." You're evil. Amara leaned her head back against the wall. For a moment, hearing her sister laugh made Busan feel less lonely. After the call ended, silence swallowed the room again. She looked toward the small notebook sitting beside the mattress. Inside were pages filled with recipes. Jollof kimchi rice, gochujang pepper soup, suya barbecue glaze over Korean fried chicken. Dreams written in cheap ink. Dreams that felt impossible lately. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Amara finally closed her eyes, but all she could think about was the strange man in the alley. His calm voice, the way the guards instantly obeyed him, and the look in his eyes when he said, "The stew smelled good." 3 nights later, the dinner rush at the backstreet restaurant nearly destroyed everyone. Orders piled up endlessly. Oil hissed. Servers yelled. Customers complained about waiting times. Amara moved between burners with fast, practiced exhaustion while sweat slid down the back of her neck. "Table 6, the owner shouted. "I heard you. Then move faster. I have only 2 hands. You Nigerians always argue." Amara bit back the angry response trying to escape her throat. She needed this job, even if the owner treated workers like disposable machines. The bell above the restaurant door suddenly chimed. Nobody paid attention at first. Then the room slowly quieted. Not completely, just enough. Amara looked up from the stove and froze. The man from the alley had entered the restaurant. Black coat, this time dry and perfectly pressed. Tall, calm, quietly observing everything around him. The owner immediately rushed forward, bowing harder than Amara had ever seen before. "Mr. Kang, welcome." Amara's stomach dropped. Of course he was rich. Of course. The owner practically dragged him toward the best table in the restaurant while every employee suddenly panicked. "Why didn't anyone tell me he comes here? He's never come before. Make everything perfect." Amara turned back toward the stove immediately. Hopefully he would not recognize her. Hopefully. "Excuse me." Her shoulders stiffened. She slowly turned around. Kang Min-jae stood near the kitchen entrance watching her calmly. Then he pointed at one simmering pot. "The stew from the alley," he said. "I want that." Amara crossed her arms instantly. "You came here for revenge?" One corner of his mouth moved slightly. "If I wanted revenge, I would wear the ruined coat." For the first time in days, Amara almost smiled. "Almost." "Sit down," she muttered. "Food takes time." As he walked away, one of the waitresses rushed beside her whispering aggressively, "Do you know who that is?" "No, that's Kang Min-jae." Amara shrugged while stirring the stew. "Should I faint? He owns one of the biggest tech companies in Busan. That explains the face." "What face?" "The face rich men have when they've never washed their own bathrooms." The waitress nearly choked, trying not to laugh. 20 minutes later, Amara personally dropped the stew at his table. Min-jae tasted one spoonful, then stopped moving entirely. Something changed in his expression. Not dramatic, just distant, like the flavor had dragged him somewhere far away. Amara noticed immediately. "You hate it." He looked up slowly. "My father used to make something similar during typhoon season," he said quietly. "When business was bad." Amara stared at him. Rich people never talked about bad seasons. They usually acted born wealthy. "That recipe came from my mother," she replied softly before catching herself. "Well, partly." Min-jae took another bite, then another. And for the first time in years, the food tasted like memory instead of survival. Min-jae returned the next night, and the night after that. At first, Amara convinced herself it meant nothing. Rich men got obsessed with strange things all the time. Expensive whiskey, vintage watches, poor neighborhoods that made them feel authentic. But Kang Min-jae did not behave like other wealthy men she had met. He never asked personal questions too quickly, never tried to impress anyone, never acted uncomfortable around kitchen workers. Most importantly, he ate everything on his plate. Every single grain of rice. That alone made Amara suspicious. "You're staring again," he said one rainy evening without looking up from his food. I'm studying you. That sounds dangerous. You eat like somebody who remembers hunger. That finally made him glance at her. The restaurant was nearly empty tonight. Just a few dock workers in the corner drinking soju loudly, while an old television played muted baseball highlights overhead. Min-jae rested his chopsticks down carefully. My father owned a seafood stall near Jigalki Market, he said. Amara leaned against the counter with crossed arms. And sometimes we sold enough to eat well. And sometimes, his expression stayed calm, but something colder moved quietly beneath it. Sometimes we lied to each other about not being hungry. Amara looked away first, because she understood that sentence too well. The owner suddenly stormed out from the kitchen. Amara, stop talking and work. She is working, Min-jae said calmly. The owner froze immediately. Amara nearly laughed at the panic on the man's face. No, of course. I only meant. Then say what you mean. The owner bowed awkwardly and disappeared back into the kitchen. Amara stared at Min-jae after the silence returned. You enjoy making people uncomfortable? No. You're good at it. I've had practice. That answer lingered strangely between them. Over the next 2 weeks, a routine formed without either of them admitting it. Min-jae would arrive late after work. Always alone. Always quiet. Amara would pretend not to notice him at first. Then eventually she would bring him whatever experiment she was testing that night. Sometimes he liked the dishes. Sometimes he didn't. Unlike everyone else, he told the truth. This one is too sweet. You insult my ancestors. They would probably agree with me. Traitor. One night she served him spicy ramen mixed with suya seasoning and grilled beef. He took one bite and immediately reached for water. Amara burst out laughing so hard she nearly dropped a plate. You did that on purpose. You looked too emotionally stable tonight. Min-jae surprised her by laughing too. Not loudly, but genuinely. The sound caught her completely off guard. Because men like him usually smiled carefully, politely, like they were always being watched. But this laugh escaped before he could control it. And suddenly he looked younger. Human. Amara hated how much she noticed that. You should laugh more, she said before thinking. His amusement faded slightly. People expect different things from me now. What things? Certainty. Answers. Control. And you don't like that? He looked down at the table quietly. I got used to it. That wasn't an answer. Amara realized quickly that Kang Min-jae revealed himself in fragments. Tiny pieces. Never enough to fully understand him, but enough to keep her curious, which was dangerous. Curiosity became attachment faster than people realized. Later that night, after closing, Amara sat alone near the back entrance counting cash tips carefully. Most of it would go home to Nigeria tomorrow. Rent would swallow the rest. Her phone buzzed suddenly. A message from her younger sister. Power got cut again. Don't worry. I'm okay. Amara closed her eyes tiredly. Another message followed. You eating properly? She almost laughed. Mothers asked questions like that. Not younger sisters. Before she could reply, another shadow appeared near the doorway. Min-jae. Still wearing his coat despite the late hour. You're still here? She asked. So are you. I work here. You counted the same bills 3 times. Amara stiffened immediately. I'm fine. I didn't say you weren't. That irritated her more. Why are you here? He held up a black umbrella. It's raining hard. So your apartment is 30 minutes away. Her expression hardened instantly. You investigated me? The owner complains loudly. Amara grabbed her bag aggressively. I can walk myself home. I know. Then why are you here? For a second, Min-jae looked genuinely caught off guard by the question, as if he had not fully examined the answer himself. Finally, he said quietly, because Busan at night is not always kind. Amara stared at him carefully, then slowly took the umbrella. Thank you, she muttered. They walked through the rain together in silence at first. Neon reflections shimmered across flooded sidewalks while buses roared through wet streets beside them. Amara hated how calm she felt walking next to him. That kind of comfort could ruin people. "So," she said eventually, "what exactly does a man like you do?" "A man like me? Rich, expensive coat, driver waiting everywhere. I build software." "That sounds boring." His mouth twitched again. "It usually is." "What kind?" "Logistics systems mostly." "That sounds even more boring." "You're very judgmental. You're very mysterious." "That's less fun." Amara shoved her hands deeper into her hoodie pockets. "You know what rich men do where I come from?" "What?" "They help you once and then act like they bought your soul." Min-jae looked at her directly for the first time that night. "Did someone do that to you?" "Many people." The honesty slipped out before she could stop it. Rain tapped softly against the umbrella between them. Finally he asked, "Then why keep accepting help?" "Because survival makes hypocrites out of everyone." That answer stayed with him. She could tell. When they reached her apartment building, Min-jae stopped at the curb instead of following. Smart. Any closer would feel too personal. Amara looked up at the old building with peeling paint and broken stairwell lights. Then back at him. "You really don't belong here." Something unreadable crossed his face. "Neither do you." The words hit harder than she expected. Not insulting, just honest. Amara looked away quickly. "Good night, Mr. Kang." "Min-jae." She hesitated, then nodded once. "Good night, Min-jae." For some reason, hearing his name in her voice affected him more than it should have. Back inside her apartment, Amara stood near the window watching his black sedan disappear into the rain. She told herself not to think about him again. Not seriously. Men like Kang Min-jae existed in completely different worlds. Worlds with safety, with lawyers, with family names that opened doors. Meanwhile, she jumped every time somebody mentioned immigration officers. She should know better. But downstairs, sitting quietly inside the back seat of the sedan, Min-jae was staring at the apartment window too. And for the first time in years, he realized he was looking forward to tomorrow. If you're still here, Untold Afro-Korean Stories family, then you already know this is no longer just about food or survival anymore. This is becoming dangerous. So before the next part changes everything, take 2 seconds to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. Because trust me, Amara and Min-jae are walking straight into a storm neither of them is ready for. The first time Amara saw Kang Min-jae angry, he did not raise his voice. That somehow made it worse. It happened on a Thursday night during the dinner rush. The restaurant overflowed with customers packed shoulder to shoulder, while exhausted workers rushed between tables carrying sizzling plates and bottles of beer. Oil crackled loudly from the kitchen. Somebody dropped glass near the entrance. The owner was already screaming at 2 waiters simultaneously. And right in the middle of the chaos, Park Dae-hyun arrived drunk. Very drunk. 3 men in expensive suits followed behind him laughing loudly, while 2 women clung to their arms pretending every joke was hilarious. Amara noticed the shift immediately. The owner practically folded himself in half bowing. "Mr. Park, welcome." Dae-hyun threw his car keys onto a table. "Food first. Alcohol immediately." His eyes swept lazily across the restaurant before stopping on Amara near the kitchen. Then he grinned. "Well, this place got more interesting." Amara instantly disliked him. Too loud, too careless. The kind of rich man who broke things and assumed money would fix them afterward. One of the businessmen beside him leaned closer. "Nigerian." Dae-hyun shrugged. "Probably." Amara heard it, ignored it. Years of survival had taught her when silence paid better than pride. Then Dae-hyun snapped his fingers. Her. "Hey!" The entire kitchen stiffened slightly. Amara turned slowly. "You talking to me?" He laughed at her tone immediately. "I like her already." "I'm not entertainment," she replied flatly. The businessmen exchanged uncomfortable looks. One whispered carefully, "Dae-hyun, maybe relax a little." No, Dae-hyun said, still grinning. "I'm curious. Why does every foreign cook put chili in everything?" Amara crossed her arms. "Because flavor exists." One of the women burst out laughing before covering her mouth. Dae-hyun leaned back in his chair, staring openly at her now. You know who I am? No. That hurts my feelings. You'll survive. The table went silent. Even drunk, Dae-hyun looked shocked someone spoke to him that way. Then suddenly he laughed loudly. Oh, Min-jae would love you. Amara's expression changed instantly. What? But before Dae-hyun could answer, the restaurant door opened again, and Kang Min-jae walked in. The entire atmosphere shifted. Not dramatically, just enough. Staff straightened automatically. Customers glanced over. Even Dae-hyun groaned dramatically. There he is. The human funeral. Min-jae ignored him completely at first. Then his eyes found Amara standing near the kitchen. He noticed her tense posture immediately. Then the drunk table. Then Dae-hyun's smirk. His voice stayed calm. What did you do? Dae-hyun placed a hand over his chest innocently. You wound me. I'm behaving. That's new. Amara looked between them carefully. You know him? Unfortunately, Dae-hyun answered first. He's my oldest friend, which is tragic for him. Min-jae finally walked closer. Unlike Dae-hyun, his presence never felt loud, but somehow the entire room bent around him anyway. What happened? He asked Amara directly. She insulted me. Dae-hyun interrupted dramatically. I asked one question. You snapped your fingers at me? Amara said coldly. Dae-hyun blinked, then laughed again. Oh, she's dangerous. She works here, Min-jae said quietly. Not for you. The businessmen exchanged another nervous glance, because suddenly this stopped feeling playful. Dae-hyun's smile faded slightly. You're serious? Yes. The silence that followed stretched too long. Then Dae-hyun scoffed and leaned back. All right, fine. I apologize. He did not sound sorry at all. Amara grabbed a tray aggressively. I don't care. And that answer made the businessman choke, trying not to laugh. Even Min-jae looked briefly amused. But Yura, sitting inside a black sedan across the street, watched the entire interaction carefully through the restaurant window, especially the way Min-jae looked at Amara. That was new, very new, and deeply dangerous. Inside the restaurant, Dae-hyun eventually became louder with alcohol. The businessmen kept drinking because rich men often mistook recklessness for charisma. Amara tried ignoring the table entirely until one of the women snapped her fingers again. Excuse me. More drinks. Amara placed the bottles down without expression. Then Dae-hyun suddenly asked, So what's your story? No story. Everybody has one. I'm working. You always this cold? Yes. That explains why Min-jae likes you. The words landed heavily. Amara looked sharply toward Min-jae. He was already watching Dae-hyun with warning in his eyes. Enough, Min-jae said. But Dae-hyun only laughed harder. Oh, come on. You've been eating here every night for weeks. You think people don't notice? Heat rushed instantly into Amara's face. Not embarrassment, anger, because now every employee was listening. The owner especially, which meant gossip would spread everywhere by morning. She turned toward Min-jae immediately. You should leave. The words surprised him. What? You heard me. Amara. I said leave. Dae-hyun finally realized he pushed too far. But the damage was done. Amara hated attention, hated pity even more. And now everyone in the restaurant was looking at her differently, like she had become important because a wealthy man noticed her. Min-jae stood slowly. Without another word, he grabbed Dae-hyun by the shoulder. Hard. For the first time all night, Dae-hyun looked sober. Outside, Min-jae said quietly. That tone chilled the entire room. The two businessmen immediately stood too. Maybe we should. Yes, Min-jae replied without looking at them. You should. Minutes later, the restaurant finally breathed again after the group disappeared outside. The owner rushed toward Amara instantly. You know Kang Min-jae personally? No. You lied. I didn't lie. You should have told me. Amara slammed plates harder than necessary into the sink. Why? So you could suddenly pretend to respect me? The owner wisely backed away. Later that night after closing, Amara stepped outside into cold air trying to calm herself down. She hated this feeling. The feeling that her life was slipping out of her control again. Footsteps approached behind her. Min-jae. Of course. Amara didn't turn around. You embarrassed me tonight. I know. And your friend is an idiot. I know that too. She finally faced him. Then why are you friends? For a second, genuine exhaustion crossed his face. Because he knew me before everyone started treating me carefully. That answer hit unexpectedly hard. Amara folded her arms tightly. Well, now people are treating me carefully too. Amara. No. Listen. Her voice cracked slightly from frustration. I worked too hard for people here to finally see me as more than some illegal immigrant causing problems. You are more than that. But now they only see the man standing beside me. Min-jae went quiet, because deep down he understood exactly what she meant. Money distorted everything around it. People stopped reacting honestly, stopped speaking normally, stopped seeing individuals clearly. And now his presence was doing the same thing to her life. Amara looked away first. I can survive many things, she said softly, but I hate feeling owned. The words landed heavily between them. Min-jae stared at her for a long moment before answering quietly. You don't belong to anyone. For some reason, hearing him say that almost hurt more. Because part of her wanted to believe him. And that was the real danger beginning now. 3 days later, immigration officers raided the restaurant district. The panic spread faster than fire. One cook sprinted through an alley still wearing an apron. 2 dishwashers abandoned crates behind a seafood shop. Somebody shouted warnings in 3 different languages, while restaurant owners suddenly pretended they had never seen half their workers before. Amara was carrying soup stock through the back hallway when the owner burst into the kitchen pale with fear. Immigration! Every muscle in her body locked instantly. Not again. Not now. Back exit! Another worker shouted. The kitchen exploded into chaos. Pots crashed. Workers ran. One waitress started crying immediately. Amara dropped the stock container and bolted toward the rear alley, while her heartbeat slammed violently against her ribs. This was the part she hated most. Not the running. Not the fear. The humiliation. The feeling of becoming something hunted. She shoved through the back door into cold air and nearly slipped on wet pavement before catching herself against a wall. Voices echoed nearby. Officers. Too close. Amara ducked behind stacked crates, breathing hard. Think, think, think. Her phone buzzed suddenly inside her pocket. The sound nearly stopped her heart. She pulled it out with shaking hands. Min-jae. For one insane second, anger exploded through her chest. Because somehow she knew. She answered in a harsh whisper. What? Where are you? How do you know what's happening? Answer the question. She pressed against the wall, listening to footsteps nearby. Behind the restaurant. Stay there. I'm not a dog. Amara. Something in his voice made her pause. Not control. Fear. For her. That only made her angrier. I can handle myself. I know you can, he said immediately. But right now, let me help you. Before she could respond, 2 officers appeared at the far end of the alley. Amara's breath caught. One pointed immediately. There. She ran. Again. Shoes slamming against wet concrete. Her lungs burning violently. One officer shouted into a radio while another chased her through the alley maze behind the restaurants. Amara turned sharply around a corner and crashed directly into Min-jae. He caught her shoulders instantly before she fell. What are you? A black car waited beside him. The rear door already open. Get in. No. The officers rounded the corner. Min-jae stepped calmly in front of her just as they approached. Everything happened fast after that. The officers recognized him immediately. Their entire posture changed. Mr. Kang. She's with me, Min-jae said simply. One officer looked uncertain. Sir, we're conducting inspections. And she's with me. His tone never rose, never sharpened. But authority settled over the alley anyway. The younger officer still looked suspicious. We received reports about illegal workers in this district. Min-jae held the officer's gaze calmly. Then continue your inspections. Silence stretched. Finally both officers bowed slightly. Yes, sir. Then they left. Just like that. Amara stared after them in disbelief. Then slowly turned toward Min-jae. You called them off. No. You scared them off. They were doing their jobs. She laughed bitterly. Must be nice having a face that protects you. Min-jae's expression shifted slightly. Get in the car. No. Rain started falling harder around them. I said no. And I'm saying you're freezing. I don't care. The driver wisely looked straight ahead, pretending not to hear anything. Amara stepped backward away from the car, her breathing still uneven from running. You had no right. No right to stop them arresting you? No right to decide things for me. Min-jae looked genuinely confused now. I was trying to help. That's the problem. The words exploded out of her before she could stop them. You rich men always think helping gives you ownership over people. His face hardened slightly for the first time since they met. That's not what this is. Isn't it? Amara's eyes burned with humiliation more than fear now. You save somebody once and suddenly they owe you gratitude forever. You don't owe me anything. That's easy for you to say. Her voice cracked loudly through the rain. People like me pay for help eventually. Always. Silence fell between them except for rainfall hitting the pavement. Min-jae stared at her carefully, then quietly asked, Who taught you that? Amara looked away immediately. Too late. The question had already landed somewhere painful. My visa sponsor, she said finally. Back when I first came here. Min-jae stayed silent, so she kept going. Maybe because exhaustion loosened old wounds. Maybe because she was tired of carrying them alone. He promised kitchen placement, housing, legal support. She laughed bitterly. Then suddenly every favor had conditions. Min-jae's jaw tightened. Amara saw it. Yeah, she said softly. Now you understand. What happened to him? He disappeared. The rain soaked through her curls completely now. He took money from multiple workers and vanished before authorities found out. And nobody helped you? Amara smiled without humor. People help beautiful tragedies, not complicated immigrants. Something dangerous flickered quietly behind Min-jae's calm expression. Not pity. Anger. Cold anger. You should have reported him. To who? She snapped. I was already overstaying by then. That ended the conversation instantly, because they both knew what that meant. Vulnerability. Fear. Dependence. Min-jae stepped closer slowly. Not enough to corner her. Just enough to lower his voice. Amara. What? You are not alone anymore. The words hit too hard. She immediately hated them, because part of her believed him for one reckless second. And believing people was how destruction started. Her eyes glistened with furious emotion. Don't say things like that. Why? Because people always leave after they make you depend on them. Min-jae looked at her for a long moment, then answered honestly. I don't think you know how to depend on anyone. That silence afterward felt too personal. Too accurate. Amara swallowed hard and looked away. The driver suddenly stepped out holding another umbrella carefully. Sir, the rain is getting worse. Min-jae nodded once before looking back at her. My lawyers can help stabilize your status temporarily. Amara's expression closed immediately again. There it is. There what is? The transaction. His patience finally cracked slightly. Why does accepting help offend you so much? Because I know what comes after. And what exactly do you think I want from you? She opened her mouth. Stopped. Because she genuinely did not know. That was the terrifying part. Min-jae never touched her unnecessarily. Never flirted carelessly. Never tried buying her affection. Everything about him felt sincere, which made him far more dangerous than obvious men. I don't know, she admitted quietly. His anger faded immediately at her honesty. For a moment they simply stood there in the rain staring at each other. Two exhausted people shaped by survival differently. Finally Min-jae spoke softly. I'm asking because I care about what happens to you. Amara's chest tightened painfully. No one was supposed to say things like that to her anymore. Not after everything it cost the last time she trusted somebody. She stepped backward slowly. I should go. You can't stay at your apartment tonight. Her eyes narrowed instantly. How do you know where I live? The officers check addresses first during follow-ups. That made her stomach drop. Because he was probably right. Min-jae reached into his coat pocket and handed her a keycard. My hotel. Amara stared at it suspiciously. You stay there too? Yes. No hidden conditions? No hidden conditions. No cameras? No weird rich man nonsense. For the first time since the alley confrontation started, Min-jae almost smiled. Just room service. Against all logic, Amara laughed weakly. And somehow that tiny sound broke the tension between them more than any apology could have. Amara did not sleep. The hotel room alone probably cost more per night than her monthly rent. Soft lighting glowed against dark wooden walls. The bed looked untouched by human suffering. Even the air smelled expensive. She hated it immediately, and yet she still stood under the shower for nearly 40 minutes, letting hot water loosen weeks of exhaustion from her muscles. By the time she stepped out wearing the oversized hotel robe, her phone showed 3 missed calls from her sister in Lagos. Fear hit instantly. Amara called back fast. Her sister answered on the second ring. Why aren't you picking up? I'm sorry. Something happened at work. You sound strange. I'm tired. You always say that. Amara sat slowly at the edge of the bed. What happened? Her sister hesitated. The landlord came again. Of course he did. Amara closed her eyes. What did he say this time? That if we don't pay before next month, he'll rent the room to somebody else. A headache started building behind Amara's eyes immediately. How much do we still owe? Don't worry about it. How much? Silence. Then quietly, 700,000 naira. Amara leaned forward, pressing fingers against her forehead. That was impossible right now. Absolutely impossible. You should eat, her sister said softly, immediately hearing the panic in her silence. You sound like you haven't eaten. Amara almost laughed. You're the younger one. Stop sounding like somebody's mother. You cry more than me. I do not cry. You cried when that chicken died. That chicken respected me. Her sister finally laughed. The sound hurt and healed at the same time. After the call ended, the room became unbearably quiet again. Amara walked toward the giant window overlooking Busan's glittering skyline. So many lights, so many people, and somehow loneliness still managed to exist everywhere. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Her body stiffened instantly. Another knock. Room service. Amara frowned. I didn't order anything. A pause. Then, Mr. Kang did. Of course he did. She opened the door cautiously. A hotel worker rolled in enough food to feed 6 people. Soup, rice, tea, fruit, expensive desserts arranged like museum art. Amara stared at the cart in disbelief. This is ridiculous. The worker bowed politely. Mr. Kang said you forget to eat when stressed. Her annoyance immediately deepened because it was true. After the worker left, Amara grabbed her phone aggressively and called Min-jae. He answered almost instantly. You sent an entire supermarket to my room. You barely ate yesterday. How do you know that? You pushed vegetables around your plate for 20 minutes. Amara blinked. You noticed that? I notice you. The quiet honesty in his voice completely disarmed her for a second. Dangerous. Very dangerous. She recovered quickly. You can't keep doing this. Sending food. Acting like my life is your responsibility. A soft silence followed. Then Min-jae answered carefully. I don't think you understand something. What? I help very few people. His tone carried no arrogance. Just truth. That somehow affected her more. Amara sat slowly near the window. Why me? Another silence. Longer this time. Finally, you look at me like I'm a person. The answer caught her off guard completely. What does that even mean? It means most people look at what I own first. His voice stayed calm, but exhaustion lived underneath it. They calculate things while speaking to me. Opportunities, advantages, connections. And I don't. No. You barely know me. You barely care who I am. Amara opened her mouth to deny it. Stopped. Because he was right. Kang Min-jae being wealthy irritated her more than it impressed her. You're still annoying, she muttered. That earned a quiet laugh from him. Eat the food, Amara. You sound bossy. I'm trying to keep you alive. I've managed 28 years without billionaire supervision. 30 if you keep skipping meals. Despite herself, Amara smiled faintly, and somehow that scared her more than anything else. The next afternoon, Min-jae brought her to one of his company offices temporarily while his lawyers handled immigration complications. Amara immediately hated every second of it. Too clean, too polished, too many people bowing nervously whenever Min-jae walked past. Employees straightened like soldiers the moment they saw him. Conversations died instantly. Nobody behaved naturally around him. Now she understood what he meant. A woman in designer clothes approached them near the elevators. Elegant posture, sharp eyes, beautiful in the controlled way expensive families trained their daughters to be. Han Yura. The moment her gaze landed on Amara, she smiled politely. Too politely. Min-jae, she said smoothly. You didn't mention company. I wasn't aware I needed permission. Still rude after all these years. Then her attention shifted fully toward Amara. And you are? Amara? Just Amara? Amara smiled thinly. For now. Something flickered behind Yura's eyes. Interest. Assessment. Calculation. She extended her hand gracefully. I'm Han Yura, legal director for his company. Amara shook her hand carefully. Yura's smile never moved. But women understood women. And instantly both recognized danger. Not open hostility. Not yet. But territory had suddenly become visible. Yura turned toward Min-jae lightly. Your father called earlier. His expression cooled immediately. I'll call him later. He sounded serious. I said later. Yura nodded once. Then looked back toward Amara again. I've heard your cooking is impressive. Amara blinked. You have spies. I have ears. Min-jae sighed quietly. Yura. What? She replied innocently. I'm being welcoming. No one believed that. Least of all Amara. After Yura finally left, Amara watched her disappear down the hallway before muttering. She hates me already. She doesn't hate you. She looked at me like I stole something expensive. Min-jae stayed silent, which answered the question. Amara turned slowly toward him. Oh my God. It's not like that. She likes you. She's an old friend. She's in love with you. Min-jae rubbed tiredly at his forehead. That conversation is more complicated than you think. Amara stared at him in disbelief. You genuinely don't notice women, do you? That sounds insulting. It is. For the first time that day he smiled slightly. Then his phone rang again. The warmth vanished instantly when he checked the screen. My father, he muttered. Amara noticed the change immediately. You don't smile when he calls. Min-jae stared at the phone a second longer before answering quietly. Some relationships become difficult after success. Amara folded her arms. That's a very diplomatic way to say something terrible. He looked at her carefully. Then surprisingly honest words slipped out. My father thinks I became cold. And did you? A long silence followed. Finally he said, I think I became efficient. That answer stayed with Amara the rest of the day. Because efficient people survived. But they rarely stayed soft. That evening, while Min-jae handled meetings, Amara wandered alone through the company cafeteria. Workers whispered the moment they recognized her. Not loudly, but enough. She's the woman from the restaurant. Is she dating him? She doesn't look rich. She's foreign. Amara grabbed coffee aggressively pretending not to hear. Same everywhere. Different country. Same judgment. As she turned around, she nearly collided with Yura again. This time, the elegant woman studied her without pretending otherwise. You care about him? Yura asked suddenly. Amara frowned immediately. That's direct. I don't enjoy wasting time. Neither do I, Amara thought. Yura stepped closer, lowering her voice. Min-jae gives pieces of himself very carefully. People usually mistake that for indifference. Amara stayed silent. But once he decides someone matters, Yura continued softly, he doesn't stop protecting them. The warning underneath the words became clear immediately. Amara met her gaze calmly. You think I'm using him? I think poor people sometimes confuse rescue with love. The sentence landed hard, because part of Amara feared exactly that. Yura noticed the hesitation instantly, and smiled. Not kindly. That was the moment Amara realized this situation was becoming much bigger than feelings. This was class, power, family, status, entire worlds colliding. And somewhere deep down, fear finally whispered something she did not want to admit. People like Kang Min-jae did not belong to women like her. No matter how badly she wanted to forget that when he looked at her. For the next week, Amara avoided Min-jae as much as possible, which became difficult because he kept finding reasons to appear near her. Coffee left outside meeting rooms. Messages asking if she had eaten. One painfully formal text that simply said, "Your knife skills remain aggressive." Amara stared at the message for almost a full minute before replying. "Your personality remains irritating." 3 dots appeared immediately. Good. You're feeling better. That annoyed her more than it should have, because somehow he always noticed her emotional state before she said anything aloud. And lately her emotions were a disaster, especially after Yura's warning. Poor people sometimes confuse rescue with love. The sentence replayed in her head constantly now. Because what if Yura was right? What if exhaustion and loneliness were making her mistake kindness for something deeper? She had seen women destroy themselves that way before. Meanwhile, Min-jae looked increasingly distracted. Board meetings irritated him faster. Employees noticed his shorter patience. Even Daehyun noticed, which was unfortunate for everyone involved. "You look terrible," Daehyun announced while walking into Min-jae's office uninvited. Min-jae kept reading documents. "You say that every time you visit, and every time I'm correct." Daehyun dropped dramatically into the chair opposite him. "So, Nigerian chef." Min-jae didn't look up. "No. That means yes. No means stop talking." Daehyun grinned shamelessly. "You like her." Silence. "Oh my God." Daehyun laughed. "You actually do." Min-jae finally looked up coldly. "You're loud. You're in love. That's a very dramatic conclusion. You started eating carbohydrates again." Min-jae blinked once. Daehyun pointed triumphantly. "Exactly. Emotional damage." Despite himself, Min-jae almost smiled. Then Daehyun's expression shifted slightly more serious. "Yura knows." The warmth vanished immediately. "I assumed so. She's handling it badly." Min-jae leaned back quietly. "I never promised her anything." "No," Daehyun admitted softly. "You just never looked at anyone else long enough for her to give up." That sentence settled heavily in the room. Because it was true. Min-jae had spent years emotionally unreachable. Safe, controlled, predictable, until Amara. Now suddenly he waited for messages like a teenager. Thought about somebody during meetings. Noticed small things again. The way she rubbed her wrist when stressed. The way homesickness hit her hardest at night. The way she pretended anger whenever something touched her emotionally. Daehyun watched his friend carefully. "She matters that much?" Min-jae answered too honestly. "Yes." That quiet confession shocked even him. Across the city, Amara stood in the restaurant kitchen preparing food for the first time since the immigration raid. Business had slowed noticeably. The owner blamed stress. Amara blamed gossip. People talked, especially after wealthy businessmen started showing unusual interest in a tiny restaurant. The owner approached nervously while she chopped green onions. Immigration came by again earlier. Her knife stopped instantly. "What?" They asked questions. Fear spread cold through her stomach. What kind of questions? About workers. Visas. He hesitated. About you. Amara forced herself to keep chopping. Did you answer? I said you quit. She looked up sharply. Why would you help me? The owner looked strangely uncomfortable. You work hard. Amara stared at him suspiciously. That's it. He avoided eye contact. And Mr. Kang would probably destroy me. That sounded more believable. Later that night after closing, Amara sat alone prepping sauce containers while rain tapped softly against the windows. She missed Lagos terribly tonight. Not because life there was easier, because loneliness felt different at home. Here silence swallowed people whole. The kitchen door opened quietly behind her. She didn't turn around. You're becoming predictable. Min-jae's voice answered calmly. You still recognized me. That expensive cologne announces itself. He walked closer slowly. You left the company without telling anyone. I'm not kidnapped. You disappeared for 2 days. Amara shrugged while sealing containers. I needed space. From me. She finally looked up. Yes. The honesty landed harder than expected. Min-jae leaned against the counter quietly. Did I do something wrong? No. That sounds worse. Amara sighed tiredly. You make things complicated. How? You care too much. The words surprised both of them. Min-jae stared at her carefully. And that's a problem? Yes. Why? Because eventually people like you remember people like me don't fit into your world. Silence followed immediately. Heavy silence. Min-jae stepped closer. You think I care about that? I think your world cares. She stood now too, frustration building again. You think rich families welcome undocumented Nigerian women into their lives? My family doesn't control me. Your father already hates me and he's never met me. Min-jae frowned slightly. He doesn't know you exist. Exactly. The truth in her voice hit painfully. Amara laughed bitterly and wiped her hands on a towel. You know what's funny? I spent years trying not to become ashamed of myself. Amara. No, listen. Emotion cracked through her voice now. Do you know how exhausting it is walking into rooms already feeling unwanted? He stayed silent. Because he did know. Not the same way, but differently. Success had isolated him so completely that even friendship started feeling artificial. People bowed too much, laughed too carefully, needed things constantly. Loneliness existed at every level of society, just wearing different clothes. Amara looked away, breathing unevenly. You make me forget reality sometimes, she admitted quietly. That's dangerous. Min-jae moved closer until only the steel counter separated them. Then softly, maybe reality deserves changing. Her eyes lifted slowly toward his. Too close. He was standing too close. Neither moved away. Amara's pulse started betraying her immediately. You say reckless things when you're tired. And you hide behind anger when you're scared. The directness stunned her. Min-jae rarely said exactly what he felt, which meant this mattered. A lot. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too warm. Amara swallowed hard. You don't understand what happens if this becomes serious. Then explain it to me. She opened her mouth. Stopped. Because explaining meant admitting there was already something happening between them. And that terrified her. Before either could speak again, the restaurant door slammed open violently. Dae-hyun stumbled inside drunk. Again. Amara, he shouted immediately. Save me from my terrible life choices. Amara jumped back instantly while Min-jae looked ready to commit murder. Dae-hyun blinked between them slowly, then pointed dramatically. Oh! Neither answered. Dae-hyun's grin widened recklessly. Oh! Leave! Min-jae said flatly. But Dae-hyun ignored him completely and collapsed into a chair. I'm being hunted. You're drunk, Amara replied. Also true. Min-jae pinched the bridge of his nose tiredly. What scandal now? Dae-hyun looked offended. Why does everyone assume scandal? Because you're usually attached to one. Unfair. His phone buzzed repeatedly across the table. Amara glanced at the screen accidentally. 23 missed calls. News alerts. Articles. Her stomach dropped slightly. What did you do? Dae-hyun looked almost proud. I may have accidentally punched a politician's son. Min-jae closed his eyes slowly. Why? He said poor people smell depressing. Amara blinked, then unexpectedly laughed. Actually laughed. Dae-hyun pointed triumphantly. See? She understands me. You are chaos in human form, Min-jae muttered. Yes, but entertaining chaos. Another news alert flashed across Dae-hyun's phone screen. This time Amara noticed her own restaurant in the background photo behind him. Her smile disappeared instantly, because reporters had already started connecting places, people, patterns, and suddenly a horrible realization settled cold inside her chest. If the media kept following Dae-hyun's scandals, eventually they would find her too. If you're still here, Untold Afro-Korean Stories family, then you already know this is no longer just about food or survival anymore. This is becoming dangerous. So before the next part changes everything, take 2 seconds to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. Because trust me, Amara and Min-jae are walking straight into a storm neither of them is ready for. The scandal exploded by morning. Every news screen in Busan seemed determined to replay the same footage endlessly. Park Dae-hyun outside a luxury bar, shouting, laughing, punching the son of a politician directly in the face while reporters screamed questions around him. And in the background of several photos, Amara's restaurant. Her stomach dropped the second she saw it. You're kidding me, she whispered. The owner nearly fainted when reporters started appearing outside asking questions. Do not speak to anybody, he yelled frantically at the staff. Especially foreign workers. Too late. People were already staring, whispering, phones pointing toward the restaurant windows. Amara kept her hood up low while preparing food in silence. One waitress approached nervously. Are you okay? No. You think reporters know about you and Mr. Kang? Amara's knife stopped sharply against the cutting board. There is no me and Mr. Kang. The waitress gave her a look that clearly said nobody believed that anymore. By evening, the pressure became unbearable. Customers came just to stare, to gossip, to speculate. Amara finally snapped after overhearing 2 women whispering near the counter. She probably planned it. Of course, men like Kang Min-jae don't notice women like that accidentally. Women like that. Amara slammed the kitchen towel down so hard everyone jumped. Then she walked straight out the back door into cold evening air before her temper exploded completely. She barely made it halfway down the alley before a familiar black sedan stopped beside her. The passenger window lowered slowly. Min-jae looked exhausted. You disappeared from work again, he said quietly. Amara laughed bitterly. And somehow you still found me. Get in. I'm not in the mood. You haven't eaten. I hate when you do that. Do what? Notice things. His expression softened slightly. Amara. No. Her eyes burned with frustration now. You know what people are saying about me? Yes. They think I trapped you. I don't care. Well, I do. Her voice echoed sharply through the alley. Min-jae stepped out of the car slowly. The driver immediately looked away again, pretending invisibility. I spent years trying to survive with dignity, Amara continued emotionally. Now suddenly people look at me like I'm some opportunist sleeping my way into rich men's lives. You know that isn't true. That doesn't matter. She looked genuinely shattered now. Perception matters, especially for women like me. Min-jae stared at her quietly, then softly asked, Women like you? Amara folded her arms tightly against herself. Foreign, replaceable, temporary. You are none of those things. You don't get to decide that. The silence afterward hurt, because part of her desperately wanted him to be right. Min-jae stepped closer carefully. You think I don't understand public judgment? Amara laughed once without humor. You're rich. People worship rich men for breathing. His face changed instantly. Something colder, older. You know nothing about what people become around money. The quiet bitterness in his voice caught her off guard. For years, he continued softly. Every conversation I have starts with calculation. He looked directly at her now. Do you know how exhausting it is wondering if anybody actually sees you? Amara stayed silent, because she did see him. Not the suits, not the cars, not the status. Just the lonely man who ate like he remembered hunger. That realization frightened her deeply. Min-jae's phone suddenly rang. His expression tightened immediately after seeing the screen. My father, he muttered. Answer it. I'll call later. Min-jae. Something about hearing his name in her voice made him finally answer. His father's voice exploded loudly enough for even Amara to hear pieces. You embarrassed this family enough already. I'm working. You are being photographed around scandals and immigrants. Min-jae's jaw hardened instantly. She has a name. And what exactly is she to you? Silence. Amara looked away immediately, because suddenly this became too intimate, too real. His father continued angrily through the phone. You built an empire just to throw it away over some woman nobody knows? Min-jae's voice dropped dangerously calm. Enough. You think people won't talk? Investors already. I said enough. Then he ended the call. Just like that. The alley went silent except for distant traffic. Amara stared at him carefully. You should go home. No. Your family clearly hates this situation. My family doesn't control my decisions. Maybe they should. The words slipped out harsher than intended. Min-jae looked genuinely hurt for the first time. Not angry. Hurt. Amara immediately regretted it. But before she could speak, another voice interrupted behind them. Min-jae. Both turned. Yura stood at the alley entrance beneath a black umbrella. Elegant as always. Composed as always. But tonight her eyes looked tired. Very tired. I've been calling you, she said quietly. Min-jae exhaled softly. Yura. No. It's fine. Her attention shifted briefly toward Amara. Not cruel. Not warm either. Just wounded. I only came because the board is panicking. Min-jae rubbed tiredly at his forehead. I'll handle it tomorrow. You can't keep saying that. The tension between them felt old. Complicated. Painfully familiar. Yura stepped closer slowly. Then finally said the thing sitting between all three of them. You've changed. Min-jae looked at her silently. You stopped caring what people think. She continued softly. You used to care. I used to be afraid. That answer stunned even Amara. Yura's composure cracked slightly. And now? Min-jae glanced toward Amara before answering honestly. Now I'm tired of living carefully. Silence. Heavy silence. Yura smiled faintly then. A sad smile. The kind people wore when they already knew they lost. I waited years for you, she admitted quietly. Amara immediately looked away. This conversation should not be happening in front of her. But Yura kept going anyway. You know what the worst part is? Min-jae's expression tightened painfully. You never lied to me, she whispered. You just never loved me enough. The raw honesty in her voice cut through the alley sharply. For the first time since meeting her, Amara saw the woman underneath the elegance. Not a rival, just somebody heartbroken. Min-jae stepped forward quietly. Yura. But she shook her head immediately. No, don't comfort me. Tears gathered in her eyes despite how hard she fought them. Because if you're kind right now, I might never recover from you. Then she looked once toward Amara. Not hateful, just devastated. He looks alive around you, she said softly, and somehow that hurt worse than anger would have. Yura finally turned and walked away before either of them could stop her. The silence she left behind felt enormous. Amara stared at the wet pavement quietly. She loved you a lot. Min-jae's voice came low. I know. And you still couldn't love her back. No. The honesty felt brutal. Amara hugged herself tightly against the cold. That's terrifying. His eyes moved toward her slowly. What is? That one person can become your whole world, she whispered. While you remain almost nothing to them. Min-jae stepped closer again. You are not nothing to me. The intensity behind the sentence made her chest tighten painfully. Before she could answer, her phone rang suddenly. Nigeria. Her sister. Fear hit instantly. Amara answered fast. Hello. The voice crying on the other side did not belong to her sister. It belonged to a neighbor. And the moment Amara heard the words building collapse, hospital, critical condition, the world tilted beneath her feet. Her phone slipped from her fingers. Min-jae caught it before it hit the ground. Amara just stood there frozen, unable to breathe, unable to think. Then finally one broken whisper escaped her lips. My sister. If your heart just dropped for Amara right now, hit the like button for her. And if you believe love should fight through class, pain, distance, and impossible odds, subscribe to Untold Afro-Korean Stories right now. Because the final part of this story, it changes everything. Amara could not breathe properly after the confession. The ocean crashed violently against the docks below them while cold winds swept across the waterfront. But all she could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat. I love you. Kang Min-jae had said it so simply, like truth. Not manipulation, not pressure. Truth. Amara stepped backward slowly, not because she wanted distance, because emotions that large frightened her. You shouldn't have said that, she whispered. Min-jae's eyes never left her face. Why? Because now everything changes. Yes. His calm certainty almost broke her completely. Amara shook her head quickly. You don't understand what loving me means. Then explain it. Frustration cracked through her immediately. It means scandals, judgment, your family hating me before they know me, people assuming I trapped you for money. I don't care. But I care. Tears burned down her face again. I care because I know how the world treats women like me. Min-jae moved closer carefully. And women like you deserve better from the world. That's not enough. Her voice shook violently now. Love doesn't erase reality. No, he said quietly. But it makes reality worth fighting. The words landed directly in the center of her chest. Dangerous man. Dangerous heart. Amara looked away toward the ocean, trying to steady herself. You say beautiful things when you're emotional. I'm usually emotional around you. Despite everything, a weak laugh escaped her. Min-jae stepped even closer now. Close enough that she could feel warmth through the cold night air. I know you're scared, he said softly. You should be scared too. I am. That surprised her enough to look up. Min-jae smiled faintly. You think loving someone like you feels safe? The honesty in his eyes destroyed the last of her defenses slowly. You make me want things I stopped wanting years ago, he admitted quietly. What things? A home. His gaze stayed fixed on her. Peace. Somebody waiting for me at the end of difficult days. Amara's breathing became uneven again, because secretly, terribly, she wanted those things too. Min-jae lifted one hand carefully toward her face. Slow enough for her to stop him. She didn't. His fingers brushed softly against her cheek while Busan's lights shimmered behind them. Stay, he whispered. Amara closed her eyes painfully. If I stay, what happens when your world decides I don't belong in it? Min-jae answered immediately. Then my world changes. And that finally broke her. Amara kissed him first. Desperate. Emotional. Like somebody exhausted from fighting feelings too long. Min-jae pulled her against him instantly. One hand at her waist while the other held her face gently like something precious. The kiss tasted like relief. Like fear. Like two lonely people finally admitting they did not want to survive alone anymore. When they finally pulled apart, Amara pressed her forehead against his chest, breathing shakily. This is a terrible idea. Yes, Min-jae agreed softly. Your father is going to hate me. He already hates most things. She laughed weakly. And Yura probably wants to throw me into the ocean. No, came another voice suddenly behind them. Just temporary emotional suffering. Both turned sharply. Yura stood several feet away holding takeout bags while looking deeply unimpressed. Amara nearly died from embarrassment. Oh my God! You chose the waterfront? Yura asked dryly. Very cinematic. Congratulations. Min-jae looked mildly annoyed. How long were you standing there? Long enough to regret having eyes. Despite herself, Amara started laughing. Real laughing. The kind that escaped unexpectedly after too much stress. Yura watched her quietly for a second. Then something softened in her expression. Not fully, but enough. She walked closer, holding out one of the takeout bags. You forgot dinner at the office, she told Min-jae. Then to Amara. And if he skips meals while emotional, he becomes unbearable. Min-jae sighed tiredly. You both talk about me like I'm a difficult child. You are. Both women answered together. That stunned all three of them briefly. Then even Yura smiled. Small, sad, but real. A month later, Busan changed slowly around them. Not magically, not perfectly, but steadily. Min-jae publicly ignored gossip until people grew bored. Daehyun continued causing scandals large enough to distract the media from everybody else. Yura maintained professional distance while quietly protecting Amara from legal attacks inside the company. And Amara stopped apologizing for existing. Her Canadian opportunity remained open, but she turned it down. Not because of Min-jae alone, because for the first time since arriving in Korea, she wanted to build something instead of escape. 6 months later, construction began near the Busan waterfront. Small location, tiny kitchen, second-hand furniture, but the sign outside made Amara emotional every single time she looked at it. Amara's table. The opening night nearly collapsed into disaster immediately. A server dropped drinks. The fryer malfunctioned twice. Daehyun flirted with customers instead of helping. And Min-jae somehow managed to ruin onion preparation so badly that Amara threatened violence. You cut them like somebody raised by wolves. I own half this building. And somehow still can't use a knife properly. You're very aggressive for a business owner. You're bleeding on my cutting board. Near the front windows, Nigerian students laughed loudly beside exhausted Korean dock workers, eating pepper soup and kimchi fried rice together. The restaurant buzzed with warmth, noise, life, everything Amara once thought impossible. A customer near the counter smiled while watching her and Min-jae argue in the kitchen. Are you two married? Amara didn't even look up from plating. He just works here. Min-jae looked offended immediately. I financed this entire restaurant. And yet nobody asked you to touch my onions. The customer burst out laughing. Min-jae moved beside her quietly while the kitchen chaos continued around them. Then softly, low enough only she could hear. You're happy. Amara paused, because the answer surprised her. After everything, fear, immigration, loneliness, survival, heartbreak. Yes, she really was. Amara finally looked up at him fully. Warm lights reflected softly across his face while restaurant noise filled the background around them. Home. That was the word settling quietly inside her chest now. Not Lagos. Not Busan. Not a building. Him. You're staring again, Min-jae murmured. I'm studying you. That sounds dangerous. Amara smiled slowly. It is. And this time, when Min-jae smiled back at her, felt earned, safe, permanent, and Untold Afro-Korean Stories family. If this story touched your heart even a little, don't leave without liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and commenting your favorite moment below. Was it the alley scene, the kitchen confession, or the final restaurant ending? And if you want more emotional Afro-Korean love stories like this one, stay here with us, because the next story might be even more unforgettable.